Technology has not been our friend today, Dr. O'Halloran.
We are live. Thank you.
I saw Stephanie on.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. I'm in my car and it looks like it's really going to storm, so y'all have to bear with me.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody saw the note that Dr. Robinson is at the Mayo Clinic with her husband and won't be able to communicate, but she will be listening in.
Okay.
Yes,
And we
sir.
hope
Thank you.
everything is well with her husband. I know they've been there a few times.
County in southeastern Georgia, Jasper County in southeastern South Carolina until.
Sorry.
You looked shocked there for a minute, Helen.
Well, I came in town for a meeting that I did some stuff with my mother or her estate, and I got in the car, left the meeting a few minutes early, and I got in the car, and I wish you could see the sky. It's pretty nasty looking.
Yeah.
That's the Savannah storming.
That's right. So
Wilmington Island, it used to look like they laid a blanket over the entire island. It got so dark.
I know.
All right, well, I guess now that we're rolling along, we'll go to the consent agenda, Faye. I guess we've got some split stuff in there.
We do. Thank you, Dr. O'Halloran. We do have 3 items on the consent agenda, all of which deal with financial services. Ms. Cutter, did you want to, as CFO, would you like to walk through these? I know the first one deals, of course, with our FY 2023 proposed operating and capital budget, which we've briefed the board on in both committee and in previous board meetings a few times, as well as in our recent workshop with the board. And a lot of good work going into that budget to ensure our financial integrity, as well as in making sure that we are providing great services in the community. And then a couple of items with software and Clever Device contract modification. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Cutter to walk us through those items.
Okay. Good afternoon again. As Mrs. DeMassimo indicated, the first consent item on the agenda is the fiscal year 23 proposed operating and capital budgets. Those budgets are submitted as balanced. We are currently in the process of proofing in preparation of the final budget document, and to ensure that all of the moves related to the reorganization is in place and properly documented. And after the board, or when and if the board approves the proposed budget on the 28th of this month, we will move forward with compiling the final document that will be outlined in accordance with the priorities and the reorganization. Any questions regarding the budget process, where we are, content?
When does the county vote on that?
On the county votes on the budget on the 24th.
Okay, so we're going to approve it after they've seen it. Okay.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I thought we had until the 30th, and then I realized their meeting
Well, they
will be after the 30th is Thursday, and they won't be meeting Friday.
Yeah, they received the paratransit budget early on. And of course, that's incorporated in their budget, and the same is incorporated within CAT's budget. So they will approve on the 24th. Okay. The next item is the RE/MAX software renewal. And that's a software that aids the planning staff in the planning process, capturing data and helping to analyze the data for planning purposes. That's a software that we have been renewing for several years and assists with the Title VI equity analysis. And the item C is the Clever Device Contract Modification Change Order. Now, this is a change order that occurred. However, it did not come before the board or via procurement or via the CEO as in accordance with the proper process. It was brought to my attention last month with me thinking that it was a request to bring forward a change order for approval. And reading the documentation, it was found that the change order had already been processed. So this agenda item is to make the board aware of what happened. There was no monetary increase or decrease in the contract amount. It was just that training originally identified was not needed, and it was swapped out for an additional service that was needed to move the electric bus process forward. Okay. The status of the FY22 budget. We'll go through a brief PowerPoint presentation that gives the overview of that. Ms. Dion, could you put it up on the screen, please?
Stephanie, one quick question before you jump there. Why are we only doing a yearly with RE/MAX?
This is a renewal. I believe the original contract had 3 renewal periods.
Oh, okay. We're still
Yeah.
in one of the
Yeah.
renewals. Okay.
Okay.
When are they due to be re-contracted?
I believe, and I'll verify this, Dr. O'Halloran, but this is the 3rd year of the renewal,
Yeah.
July 1. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of remember them being around since I've been on the board, and that's 5 years now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. The fiscal year 22 budget still looks pretty good. Our revenues exceeding expenditures. Expenditures are still down, of course, and that's due primarily to position vacancies. The revenue by category, no surprises here. The transit tax revenue is second to our grant revenue, followed by monies from Chatham County to fund our paratransit services. Expenses, here again, salary and wages, 49%. And our benefits, 17%. It makes up the greatest portion. Our budget followed by, surprisingly, fuel cost, and then administrative services that follows.
Those fuel costs are going to be going up again.
Yeah, they're constantly going up. The cash receipts for the month are presented as listed. We ended the month of May with a cash balance of a little over $5.9 million.
But Stephanie, before you leave that slide, one thing I just wanted to mention to this committee, is yesterday we had a meeting with the hospitality group, or a group of from the hospitality industry, and the issue of, or the discussion of POR fees came specifically up, and this was related to particularly our marine services activities with the ferries and such. And I think that it will be welcome news to this committee and ultimately to the board to hear that the discussion around the level funding of those POR fees for such a number of years, that there is a recognition and an understanding of a desire to have those services, of their importance and value, and of the notion that a more robust level of support is going to be needed in the future moving forward. And it was a very positive conversation. So that's the place where we start on things like this. And I just wanted you to be aware that there are good conversations being had there, and there's a welcomeness to having to discuss those fees. So good news.
And wanted to add to that is that that's going to be very much needed when we get into FY24. You know, we don't know what the FTA is going to do in terms of operating funds. It's really, so we are really trying to prepare for what is termed a fiscal cliff, by saving and being as efficient as possible, and then having these conversations with our community partners to help keep these services going. And as Mr. Massimo said, that SAME group, I really think they get it, and they know that they're going to have to invest more in that ferry system.
I think also related to that, I would add, since Ms. Cutter brought it up, talking about the fiscal cliff and figuring that out, is the ride hailing fees that were imposed at the state level back in 2020, but were ultimately directed entirely to Atlanta. We are having some really positive and productive conversations with state leadership in terms of looking forward to this next legislative session, and how we can be at the table in ways that we think will be very helpful to us in realizing what I think of as our fair share of those revenues. Again, that's a source that can cover both capital and operating, and will be really critical to us moving forward as we look to that fiscal cliff and such. So I just want to mention that as well. We've got a lot of activity occurring around the financial space.
Are those POR fees, are they strictly for transportation issues, or is that split with the city?
It's split. Transportation gets a piece of it.
And is the senior circulator back in action, or is that still down?
That's still down, Dr. O. They're still working through getting that up and going. I believe planning is in discussion with the city as we speak regarding senior circulator and expanding usage of the DOT shuttle.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And there are quite a few new hotels in town, so I'm assuming that those fees will be going up.
Yes, yes.
I've seen at least 7 or 8 new ones in the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And they're staying full too.
Thankfully.
Yes, next slide. Okay, this is just a picture of our cash receipts by month. We anticipate this month it really being more than usual. We will see when we report in July what that number actually looks like. But right now we are projecting a little over $11 million. And that's it. I also, I didn't include in this report, we are gathering some HR stats that will be provided in more detail. The number of exits, kind of summarizing what the exit interviews are saying, and by department, by category, and that'll be before the board, ready by governance. And that's all I had. Dr. O, Director Stone, any questions?
I have a quick question that doesn't necessarily pertain to your report today, but I'm just following with the county and some other organizations, you know, the cost of our employees, their benefits. How long are our employees employed before they are vested for our benefits?
Well, when an employee comes on board, they can enroll in CATS benefits.
Right, but I mean, do they have to, once they get ready to leave or retire or whatever, is there a minimum amount of time that they need to be there before those benefits are accessible?
Well, you know, we have that agreement to manage that 401 plan with Mission Capital, and the employee contributes, and then the organization contributes a certain amount, and there is no vestment period. If they leave, they can pull their money out. You know, that's totally up to them.
Okay. I mean, I was just comparing it to what the county does.
Right.
It used to be when I was first elected, it was 5 years.
Yes.
And now we moved it to 10.
10. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And the county has a qualified pension plan other than the investments, the 401 plans. Is that right?
Right. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Anything else, Dr. O? Anything?
Stephanie, did we have anything else on the exit interview with FTA?
Oh, yes. The exit interview is scheduled for Friday. And the report is soon to follow. I've been saying throughout the process, you know, they're going to mention about the 35-foot electric bus purchase and how that money was drawn down. And I think because there's been good communication with Region 4, they really understand what happened. Now we may need to come back to the drawing board. I'm going to reach out to Region 4 to begin some conversation as to how they recommend that we proceed to reconcile that. And that may mean pulling down additional SPLOST money to cover that. The FTA grant was only 16% of that procurement. It wasn't the traditional 80%. It was only 16%. And when the drawdowns were done, it was based on, you know, the logical $500,000 per vehicle, but that exceeded the 16%. So we're going to have to address that. And FTA have different ways that they can consider. So we're going to work through that. And I'm going to reach out even before Friday, before we have the exit interview, so that I can say we have reached out to the FTA to begin conversations as to how that matter can be resolved. And there are some other things on the report, but what Mr. Stanako did indicate was overall, Chatham Area Transit ranks along with some larger transit agencies in terms of compliance, and thinks we did quite well. You'll see some findings, but nothing that they define as overly significant. So,
Gotten the FMO report back yet? From like a year and a half ago, or is that still in progress?
well, at Friday, they will begin the written report, and that report covers July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2021. That's the report we'll be receiving.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I know I've heard this twice now about the financial cliff.
Yes.
How serious is this going to be?
Well, Dr. O, and you've always talked about and had concern about the reserves. We are trying to build the reserves to help prepare for that cliff, along with identifying new revenue sources, sharing in pots of money that we should have been sharing in but haven't, but trying to bring that pot of money to the table to also get us through those tough periods. We
Dr.
have
O,
no idea.
I'm sorry, Ms. Cutter. Go ahead.
Yeah, at this time, we have no idea what the federal government is going to do with those traditional grant monies that we are so accustomed to receiving. So we're going to have to do some preparation, and of course, identifying other sources of revenue as well.
So Dr. Halloran, one of the things that we're doing now is the way Ms. Cutter and I have been working through the budget is to make assumptions that the federal, no state, no additional, we're not looking towards any particular funding source, local, state, or federal, for there to be any dramatic change. However, we're not, and when I say dramatic change, what I mean is that there's not going to be somebody who's going to come swooping in and make up what every transit
That's
system in
correct.
the country is looking at as a fiscal. So we're acting as though nothing is going to change. The fiscal cliff is going to be here, and we've got to be prepared to weather this in an appropriate way, maintaining our financial integrity ourselves. That said, as Ms. Cutter mentioned, and as we talked about earlier in the conversation, we know that there are funding sources that are already there. Ride-hailing fees is a great example of one where we've not been sharing in that revenue stream, but we should be able to and could be able to. So we're doing all the work that's necessary now to put ourselves in a place that when the legislature goes back into session in 2023, we've got a wealth of support built up both locally and at the state level behind that to have good conversations around that. So we're starting to bring in some of these new opportunities to begin to, but we're not counting on anything. We're budgeting as if we've got to make sure that we handle all this very effectively. And we're considering that just like every other transit system is in all of our other, important conversations that are going on right now related to labor and all those kinds of things. So I think the shortest answer to your question is how serious is this? We're taking it very seriously. But I think it's still a question mark right now. It's yet to be seen if the feds are going to come back and say, we're going to make some adjustments here to account for the kind of funding we've been pumping into transit systems across the country that we won't still be doing. And then we've got this opportunity to discuss ride-hailing fees at the state level. And then we're looking at things like we just mentioned earlier with a great master transit plan that's a great business plan that persuades other partners locally. Perhaps there's a look at the POR, perhaps there's a look at some of the other local funding levels and so forth, but we're not counting on any of that. Even as we're working at it, we're not counting on any of that.
Now, and if we get a change in DC, we may see some changes in funding for transit.
Yes,
Correct.
that's correct. Yes.
We are working. Ms. Cutter and I always take sort of worst case scenario approach to this so that we make sure that if we come out better, all the well. But in the meantime, we want to be sure that we are very prudently and consistently maintaining our financial integrity.
And we have all the people we need right now to access these funding opportunities.
We
I
do.
know there were a couple of openings in the chart. Are we full now?
In which specific ones are you referring to, Dr. O? I want to be sure I'm answering.
I
the
know
question
you
very
were doing
directly.
some of the planning work and some of the other parts that we hadn't replaced existing people yet.
We are recruiting right now for a planning. I can't remember now the exact name, but it's planning and project manager position. We are recruiting for that one right now. There's some other key positions that we're also recruiting for that are outside of planning per se, but are very necessary in terms of delivering what we have, because we can never lose sight of that as well. And the other thing that we're doing is, we've had a couple of grant awards recently. We had one that I think we mentioned to you maybe a couple of weeks ago. And we also, I think there's some announcements that will likely be forthcoming this week where there could be some other funding opportunities. The thing that we're having to work through, though, is the COA and TDP were already underway or getting out there at the time that I came in. We looked at the scope at the time when I joined CAT and made sure that we were directing that scope in a way that would work effectively with the master transit plan effort, which is also, the RFPs are in and the review committee is hard at work on reviewing the 5 proposals that we got, which was an extraordinary response. So we've got those 2 things that are already in play. And then some of the grants that we're getting, the scoping of those, we need to look at it and ensure that we are using those to maximum advantage and that we are eliminating duplication and redundancy that could be present in maybe some lack of specificity in some of the scopes, for example, those kinds of things. So Ms. Cutter and I are working very closely with planning staff as well as with our funding partners to be sure that we're going to make those dollars count and make a difference, and there won't be overlap and duplication in those kinds of things as well. So a lot of activity ongoing in that space.
And where are we with the dock and the ferry for the new location? I know they're waiting on approvals for some stuff.
We're getting closer. As a matter of fact, today's been a very, I would call it a very lively day on that particular project. We have, we understand the time sensitivity to that particular grant and the need to get it delivered. We're still working through some issues with regard to deeds, appraisals, some of that business end of it. There's not an issue right now, but we're certainly getting into crunch time. And so this morning there were a lot of back and forth and lively discussions with the engineering firm and some of the property owners down on that end, property interests, as well as the city and so forth to, let's go ahead and get that punched out. But it's moving along.
Okay. I think that's it for me.
Okay.
All right. I think the next thing on the agenda might be the Director's Digest, and it's included in your package. There were a few questions. This is for questions that you all pose between meetings. The answers are already.
The HR part.
I think Ms. Cutter mentioned that earlier.
Just reminding the directors that we are currently undergoing open enrollment, wherein employees are choosing their benefit package for the upcoming fiscal year.
And hopefully signing up for the wellness part.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr. O, one other thing that we're doing with regard to on the human resource end is there was a general manager's call with FTA earlier today that I participated in. They hosted kind of a webinar type meeting, and there was a group that they have assembled called the Transit Workforce Center. And I've already made a technical assistance request of them because everyone is still, especially on operators, is still struggling with that. Market looks so different now than it used to. And the things that the people that are currently our operators that have the 20, 30 and more years of service, that kind of a part of the labor market is just not the same anymore. So figuring out those recruitment strategies is something that FTA is wanting to be very active and supportive in the space with all of us. So I've already reached out to them for a technical assistance request to anything that they're learning from other properties or anything that they can help us with. But we've also yesterday, Ms. Arden and Mr. Dumas and myself sat down and brainstormed around that and have some ideas around, in addition to all the incentives that the board has given us as tools to be able to help in that space, is also some things that we can do around flexibility of schedules. That is a really big thing right now that we needed to be able to do in order to, I think, bring fresh talent into the market that will stay with us. So anyway, just wanted to be sure that I mentioned that as well in the human resources space.
And are we pretty much COVID free at this point, or are we still dealing with that problem on a monthly basis?
We don't seem to be having Ms. Cutter, you can I think we've had a few here and there, but there's not been any kind of like outbreaks or anything like that I'm aware of.
Right. And I've had a conversation with the safety director to begin to asking that he began to put out the weekly updates to employees because the records are that there is an uptick now, and we need to keep it in front of employees to stay healthy and take preventive measures. So we're going to be communicating that throughout the organization.
Especially now that we're back to full capacity.
Yes, sir.
The other thing related to all that is Ms. Cutter and I have been working diligently. We are extremely mindful too, a little bit related to COVID, but just generally sort of the times we're in with mental health issues. Director Stone has been very helpful in terms of helping us make contact with Parker's, as well as some mental health resources that we're utilizing here now through the county and so forth. But in addition to that, Parker's is going to be the sponsor for our mural, our wellness mural in the Wellness Center. So when the Wellness Center reopens, although people can go in and out there now, but when we reopen it with the programming around mental health, around exercise, around nutrition, all these other sorts of components of wellness, when we reopen, we really are going to place a great emphasis on the mental health aspects of it and making sure we're supporting our employees and colleagues here through, what lots of different things that may be working on them right now. So I just wanted you to know that Wellness Center is going to be, when we reopen it, such a tremendous asset to our human resources here.
Good. I think that's all.
All right. The next item was, I just wanted to mention the Director's Digest is included in your report. Obviously, you can just read that in more detail at your leisure, but there were a few questions that have been asked since the last meeting around e-tickets and e-ticket sales as a percentage of sales, and it was around 14% on the e-tickets. There was also a couple of questions related to definition of burden, particularly as it relates to I think this came out of our reporting last month on the ferry maintenance facility and dock project, and that required Title VI inequity analysis. And what exactly is a burden? A practice that affects one group of people that have protected characteristics more than another, even with rules that apply in what is considered a more neutral way, but nonetheless that burden still rests upon a particular group. And then there was also how do we budget for burdens in flood zones? And of course, in a flood zone, you got to look at the physical characteristics of the property. We look at it more from the hazard mitigation, hazard management, and then that same sort of burden analysis that we described earlier, however that may apply. There's also some questions around grant amounts we had applied for, and those answers were also offered in the Director's Digest. So if you have a chance to review those in more detail at your leisure, if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay. And we got a couple on other committee
We do.
business.
So hang on, let me get back to so under other committee business, when I mentioned the general managers meeting this morning that the FTA regional office had sponsored. And one of the things that was a real focus was asset management. You know that we have refocused on asset management in a very in a very keen way. We know that that's an area that we've got lots of opportunity in terms of our reorganization. And so that asset management focus and position was consistently mirrored in the conversations that we had with FTA this morning in that general managers meeting around the importance of that. And the importance FTA is going to continue to place on that every single year moving forward. There also will be a report in the System Development Planning Committee around the equity analysis for route modifications. You've been following, I think, some of the public hearings that we've been having around both budget and route modification work. And those meetings have been well attended. And I think overall our suggestions and so forth have been very well received. There will be a report on the property casualty liability workman's comp insurance renewal. Ms. Cutter may want to talk a little bit more about that, but and I think our insurance rep will be available during that committee to be able to talk more about that, and in the upcoming meeting to talk more about that. But they've been marketing us for our various renewals that are coming due. And I think we're going to have a very positive review for you there. COVID-19 emergency measures extension. This is a standard an item to just continue that 3-month increment of emergency measures extension around encouraging the use of masks and so forth, as well as a couple of other, I think there's another item on there as well. And then we are so proud of the work that was done around the vision, mission, goals statement work that you all have done, especially in our recent workshop. And that's already been presented to you in its final form, and we're already using it to govern the work that we're doing around the master transit plan development. In fact, all the work that we're doing, we're drawing everything back to that vision and mission that we have all committed to. And so that'll also be presented for formal adoption in the Executive Governance Committee and then in a subsequent board meeting.
Did we cover the amendments that Beverly sent out last night? Were they on I don't remember if they're on the agenda because I printed this out yesterday.
Beverly, can you comment on that?
Dr.
There's
O'Halloran, are you-
Beverly. You sent out something yesterday about some,
One moment, Dr. O'Halloran.
I forgot what they were. There were some
Okay,
changes.
Is it the updates, Dr. O'Halloran, for the Uber and the
Yeah.
bus stop amenities, as well as, yes,
I
we have
believe
those.
so, yes.
Yes.
We have those 3 reports. Yes, sir. One moment.
Dr. O'Halloran, this is Ashley Goodrich, if you can hear me. Each of
They're
the-
very low volume.
Okay, is that better?
We can't hear Ashley.
Hi, Tabitha.
Hey, how are you?
Hiding down in the corner on me there.
Ashley,
Yeah, I
the
am.
other one, as well as the Garden City expansion update. Do you have it in front of you?
Yes, I want to make sure everybody can hear me.
Much
Well,
better.
Okay,
Oh, it's still a
So-
little low.
so to give an update on Garden City, We have been working with their city staff and had a further discussion on the zoning parameters of the Garden City areas and where our existing service has been. But that's also within the CAT Special Tax District and outside the CAT Special Tax District. So we've gotten a little bit closer on formalizing a little bit of what Garden City wants, what timelines to look at for implementation. And then we're sending back to Garden City kind of later this week, sort of a finalized, based upon their parameters from the immediate sense, and then for a greater expansion down, and let's say over the next year, the stop locations that provided that they're wanting to start with something short and quick to implement within current service areas, and then look at expansion down the road. To sort of be a little more specific to that, there's the State Route 21 corridor, which is the existing Route 3 that is sort of split in half. That would be the phase 1 that's been previously discussed. And then there's phase 2, which is State Route 307. Garden City is still looking at how the property by type, by land use, and how that affects into transit service. So that land use discussion is a little bit more on their end. And then we've been working with them to supply, what reasonable transit amenities can be implemented into that. In terms
I
of
know
time,
at one point they were very interested in getting stops by the high school, because I'm assuming they're still expanding and putting all the schools in that one location.
yes.
And I think that's where our driving training course is too, on that same property.
I'm in the planning department in the back of the building, so I can't say that I've been to our course. But I hope that, if we're the course is a separate piece to whether or not we can hopefully provide a little bit of better service in that area. It is right by Groves High School.
The other thing I would mention with regard to Garden City is both the mayor and the city manager have been over to meet with us, and we've had really good discussions. They are strongly committed to this, and this is the kind of smart service expansion that is important, I think, to CAT's future. So we're excited about it. The fact that there's also an Amazon facility in their area also offers some unique opportunities with regard to some of the work that Amazon is doing nationally around TOD, and that Ashley mentioned the land use work that they're doing, some thought around workforce housing and that kind of thing will be important. So we've got a lot of opportunity in the Garden City discussion.
Did anyone have any other questions on the memos in general, or do you want me to read through each one? Or was it just?
I just wanted to make sure if there were any questions that we could get them out of the way before we get to governance next week. But everything else looked fine in there, just to get an update. I know Mayor Bethune's been around and he's been talking about that extra stops on 21 for a while now. That goes back about 3 years when I first went out there. I think Mike Brown was CEO at the time, or interim CEO. All right, I think that covers to any other questions anybody has before we adjourn. All right, well, if everybody's all set, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. And thanks for participating and for your attention today.
Thank you.
Have a good week.
Everything was really, really well thought out.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.